The Nexus Tribunal existed in the spaces between spaces, where 13 dimensions folded into something resembling a courtroom if you squinted through the right kind of physics. Today, it hummed with the sort of tension usually reserved for impending apocalypses or really awkward family dinners. "State your designation for the record," commanded High Arbitrator Vexthul, a being whose voice emerged from what might charitably be called a face if faces were made of crystallized time and regret. The human defendant leaned back in her restraint field with the casual confidence of someone who had clearly never met a weapon she couldn't improve upon. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Weapons Engineer, Terra Dynamics Unlimited, though my colleagues prefer the Architect." Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. "How delightfully ominous," muttered Prosecutor Kethvar, his crystalline form chiming discord. Each facet of his body contained the screaming souls of a dead star system, which made him ideal for cosmic law but terrible at parties. "Your Honors, this being stands accused of creating what she claims is the ultimate expression of destructive capability." Vasquez snorted. "Ultimate? I made it in my garage over a weekend. My 10-year-old nephew could probably build 3 of these with a chemistry set and sufficient motivation." The tribunal's collective intake of breath created a minor gravitational anomaly. Representative Morthgli of the Entropy Courts, a creature that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and found it deeply tiresome, leaned forward with interest that manifested as small reality tears in the air around her. "You speak casually of forces that could unweave the fundamental structure of existence itself," Morthgli observed, her voice echoing from several possible futures at once. "This troubles us." "Everything troubles you," Vasquez replied. "That's literally your entire species' defining characteristic. You're professionally concerned about the heat death of the universe, and that's not even scheduled until next Thursday." Kethvar's crystalline surfaces brightened with indignation. "Your Honor, I present Exhibit A, the so-called Entropy Blade." A containment field materialized, revealing what looked disappointingly like a slightly oversized kitchen knife with some blinking LED strips duct-taped to the handle. "That's not what it looked like when I submitted it," Vasquez said, squinting at her creation. "Did security confiscate the good parts?" "We removed 17 separate reality-destabilizing components," replied Chief Security Officer Gornith, whose entire species had evolved from living weapons and consequently understood the theoretical maximum of dangerous. What remains is allegedly still capable of severing the bonds between quantum dimensions. "Allegedly?" Vasquez looked genuinely hurt. "I provided a full technical manual, complete with troubleshooting guides and warranty information. High Arbitrator Vexthul consulted documents that existed in languages that had never been spoken. The prosecution claims this device represents an existential threat to universal stability. How do you respond?" "I respond that you're all being extremely dramatic about basic applied physics." Vasquez gestured at the contained weapon. "Look, I understand you're concerned, but this is entry-level stuff. My species figured out how to split atoms before we invented proper plumbing. We built weapons that could sterilize planets while we were still arguing about whether the Earth was round." "Which should terrify any rational being," Kethvar interjected. "Should it, though?" Vasquez tilted her head thoughtfully. "Because here's the thing about humans. We break stuff. All the time, usually by accident. My nephew once broke what you'd probably call a reality anchor, because he thought it was a really complicated Rubik's Cube." Representative Zephys of the Void Traders, whose species existed primarily as concentrated financial anxiety, finally spoke. You cannot seriously suggest that universal annihilation is equivalent to a child's puzzle. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating an observable fact. Humans have an unfortunate tendency to dismantle things that other species consider immutable laws of nature. We do it so consistently that I'm starting to think it might be genetic. Preposterous, declared Morthegly, though several of her dimensional aspects looked uncertainly at each other. Is it? Vasquez leaned forward, and the restraint field hummed with increased intensity. When was the last time any of your species looked at something labeled ultimate weapon of cosmic destruction and thought, I wonder what happens if I reverse the polarity? The tribunal exchanged glances that transcended normal space-time. The point remains, Kethvar continued, his tone suggesting he was beginning to question several life choices, that your device could theoretically unravel reality itself. Theoretically, yes. Practically? Vasquez shrugged. Let me demonstrate. Before anyone could object, she somehow slipped free of the restraint field. A feat that should have been impossible given that it existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Her hand closed around the entropy blade's handle. Wait, began High Arbitrator Vexthul. Don't, added Morthegly from several timelines at once. This is highly irregular, protested Gornith. Vasquez activated the weapon. Reality hiccuped. The pocket universe they'd prepared for testing. A small, expendable dimension containing nothing more threatening than some ornamental physics and a few decorative constants, simply ceased. Not exploded, not collapsed, not faded away. It just stopped being, leaving behind a patch of absolute nothing that made everyone's philosophical foundations itch. There, Vasquez said, deactivating the blade. See? Works exactly as advertised. Severs quantum dimensional matrices, unravels fundamental force interactions, produces a localized zone of absolute entropy. Pretty standard stuff, really. The silence that followed was so complete, it qualified as its own form of existence. Standard. Kethvar's voice cracked across several octaves. You just unmade an entire universe. A very small universe, Vasquez corrected. Barely worth the name, honestly. More of a universe-let, a cosmic studio apartment. Representative Zephys made a sound like a stock market crashing in slow motion. The implications are staggering. If such a weapon fell into the wrong hands, it would probably get broken within a week, Vasquez interrupted. That's what I keep trying to tell you people. Humans break things. It's what we do. It's practically our species motto, hold my beer and watch this. High Arbitrator Vexthul's temporal features shifted into what might have been confusion, if confusion could exist across multiple time streams simultaneously. You seem remarkably unconcerned about creating a weapon capable of ending existence itself. Vasquez examined the blade thoughtfully, then looked up at the tribunal with an expression of mild surprise. Ending existence? This little thing? She gestured dismissively at the device that had just unmade reality. Your Honors, this couldn't end existence if it tried. Trust me, I've done the math. The court stenographer, a blob of sentient mathematics that recorded proceedings in 17 different probability matrices, had already filed 3 formal complaints about the impossibility of documenting human logic. Now it quivered with what could only be described as existential dread as defense attorney Marcus Holloway rose to address the tribunal. Holloway looked exactly like what would happen if someone took a tax lawyer and subjected him to cosmic radiation, utterly mundane, slightly radioactive, and possessed of a supernatural ability to make apocalyptic scenarios sound like clerical errors. Your Honors, he began, consulting a briefcase that definitely hadn't existed moments before. My client's actions today perfectly illustrate why this tribunal's concerns are fundamentally misplaced. Misplaced? Kethvar's crystalline form rang with indignation. She just demonstrated a weapon that deleted reality? Temporarily, Holloway corrected, pulling out a manila folder labeled Precedent Cases, Things Humans Have Accidentally Broken. And only a very small bit of it. Frankly, I'm impressed she managed to keep the destruction so localized. Usually when my species encounters ultimate weapons, we break them completely by Thursday. High Arbitrator. Vexthal's temporal features arranged themselves into something resembling skepticism. You speak as though this is common occurrence. Oh, it's incredibly common. I have documentation. Holloway opened his briefcase fully, revealing what appeared to be an interdimensional filing system that had been organized by someone with a severe organizational disorder and access to reality bending. Technology. Let's see. Here's a case from 2019, where a human child broke what the Vegan Confederacy called their unbreakable mind prison of eternal torment. Impossible, declared Representative Morthgley, though her certainty wavered across several timelines. The child thought it was a snow globe, Holloway continued, pulling out a photograph of a 7-year-old girl holding a cracked sphere while smiling at the camera. Turned out the eternal torment was just really poorly calibrated white noise. The kid fixed it with some cotton balls and made it into a meditation device. The Vegans had been using it wrong for 3,000 years. Prosecutor Kethvar's surfaces dimmed with what might have been embarrassment if crystalline beings could feel shame. That proves nothing about cosmic-scale weapons. Doesn't it? Holloway produced another folder, this one significantly thicker. Here's documentation of humans interacting with devices that your various species classified as reality-threatening. I have 17 cases of humans accidentally improving universe-ending weapons, 43 instances of humans breaking indestructible barriers by leaning on them wrong, and one particularly memorable case where a human teenager turned what the Nexus Defense Corps called a consciousness-devouring void into a dating app. The tribunal's collective silence suggested they were beginning to reassess several fundamental assumptions about the nature of ultimate power. The prosecution wants you to believe, Holloway continued, warming to his theme, that my client's weapon represents an unprecedented threat. But I submit that the real threat would be if humans couldn't break it. Representative Zephys made a sound like a pension fund collapsing. That makes no logical sense. It makes perfect human sense, Holloway replied. Consider, every species in this tribunal represents some form of cosmic fear, correct? Entropy, oblivion, economic collapse, temporal paradox. You've all encountered weapons that could theoretically destroy everything you hold dear. Theoretically? Gornith interjected. These weapons have been tested. By whom? Holloway's question cut through the security chief's objection like a laser through bureaucratic red tape. Have any of your species actually used these ultimate weapons on their intended targets? The pause that followed suggested the answer was no. Of course not, Holloway continued, because you're all too sensible to risk universal annihilation for the sake of curiosity. You create these weapons as deterrents, as symbols of power, as last resorts you hope never to employ, and because you're sensible beings with a proper respect for cosmic forces, these weapons remain theoretical threats forever. Which is exactly as it should be, Morthgley protested, though several of her dimensional aspects looked uncertain. Is it, though? Holloway reached into his briefcase again, this time producing what looked suspiciously like a broken children's toy. This used to be the hegemony of sorrow's despair engine, a device designed to drain hope from entire star systems. A human toddler got hold of it during a diplomatic visit. What happened? High Arbitrator Vexthal asked, against what was probably his better judgment. The kid figured out that if you wound it up backward, it played lullabies, Holloway said. The hegemony had been using it to suppress rebellions for millennia. Turns out they just needed better music. Kethvar's crystalline surfaces flickered with something that might have been frustration. These examples are irrelevant. The defendant's weapon actually functions as designed. For now, Holloway agreed. But give it time. Humans have a remarkable talent for finding the off switch on things that allegedly don't have one. Your Honor, interrupted Dr. Vasquez from her position at the defendant's table. If I may? By all means, Vexthul replied, sounding like someone who had given up all pretense of controlling the proceedings. The thing about ultimate weapons, Vasquez said, addressing the tribunal directly, is that they're only ultimate until someone figures out they're not. My species has been doing that for roughly 10,000 years. We turned fire into cooking. We turned controlled explosions into transportation. We turned the power that fuels stars into electricity for our refrigerators. Those are natural forces, Morthegli objected, not artificial constructs designed specifically to do exactly what they're supposed to do until humans get bored and start fiddling with them. Vasquez finished. Look, I'm not trying to be dismissive of your concerns. I understand that from your perspective, weapons like this represent existential threats that must be contained, controlled, regulated. As they should be, Zephys insisted. Absolutely, Vasquez agreed. By species with the good sense not to poke them just to see what happens. Unfortunately, I'm human, which means I poke things. It's genetic. We can't help ourselves. Holloway cleared his throat. Which brings me to my closing argument for this phase of the defense. The prosecution's entire case rests on the assumption that ultimate weapons should remain ultimate. But humanity's track record suggests that nothing stays ultimate for long once we start paying attention to it. That's terrifying, Gornith muttered. That's quality control, Holloway corrected. If humans can break your ultimate weapon, it was never ultimate to begin with. It was just temporarily intimidating. High Arbitrator Vexthul consulted his temporal documents again, possibly hoping they might contain some guidance for dealing with a species that treated cosmic threats like particularly challenging puzzles. The defense suggests, he said slowly, that humanity serves as some sort of universal safety inspector? Inadvertently, Holloway admitted. We don't do it on purpose. We just have this unfortunate compulsion to see how things work, usually by taking them apart. The fact that most of your ultimate weapons can't survive that process suggests they weren't as ultimate as you thought. Dr. Vasquez nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. If my entropy blade can actually end existence, then existence was already in serious trouble. If it can't, which I strongly suspect, then we've just learned something valuable about the theoretical limits of entropy manipulation. How reassuring, Kethvar said dryly. It should be, Holloway replied, because if you're right about the weapon's capabilities, then the universe was doomed the moment any species developed sufficient technology to build one. And if you're wrong, then you've been living in fear of shadows. The tribunal exchanged looks that transcended normal causality, each representative grappling with the uncomfortable possibility that their greatest fears might be significantly less fearsome than they'd assumed. Either way, Dr. Vasquez added cheerfully, we'll find out soon enough. That's what humans do. Your Honors, Holloway announced, producing what appeared to be a holographic projector cobbled together from spare parts and questionable scientific principles, I would like to present historical evidence that fundamentally challenges our understanding of what constitutes an existential threat. The device flickered to life, displaying what looked suspiciously like a home movie shot through a kaleidoscope, having an argument with quantum mechanics. Exhibit B47, Holloway continued, filmed approximately 6,000 years ago in what humans call Mesopotamia. The hologram resolved into a scene of remarkable mundanity. A farmer's hut, complete with grain stores and livestock that looked suspiciously normal for an interdimensional court recording. A human male emerged from the structure, carrying what appeared to be farming implements. "That's Ashurnapal the grain counter," Holloway narrated, notable primarily for inventing an early form of crop rotation and for using what the Obsidian hegemony called their reality-shredding crystal of infinite sorrow as a doorstop. The hologram zoomed in on an innocuous-looking stone wedged beneath the farmer's door. It pulsed with what could generously be described as ominous energy if one were inclined toward melodrama. "Impossible," breathed Representative Morthglee. "The Obsidian hegemony spent 3 millennia perfecting that crystal. It was designed to unmake the conceptual framework of happiness itself." "Indeed," Holloway agreed. "According to their documentation, any being who gazed upon it would be consumed by existential despair so profound that they would forget the very concept of joy. Ashurnapal used it to keep his door from swinging shut in the wind." The hologram shifted to show the farmer casually stepping over the crystal multiple times while going about his daily business, apparently unaffected by reality shredding, despair. "He lived to 97, Holloway added. "Contemporary accounts describe him as annoyingly cheerful and persistently optimistic about next season's barley harvest." Kethvar's crystalline form chimed with what sounded like a migraine. "There must be some explanation. Perhaps humans are naturally immune to psychic weaponry." "That's what the Renaissance Consortium thought," Holloway replied, advancing the hologram to a new scene. Florence, 1487. Meet Lorenzo the Alchemist, who discovered that what the void philosophers called their formula for universal dissolution made an excellent wine preservative. The new scene showed a cheerful man in period costume, adding drops of something that made reality ripple to wine barrels in his cellar. The wine glowed softly and appeared to be aging backward. The formula was supposed to reduce the entire universe to its component mathematical equations, Holloway explained. Lorenzo found that 3 drops per gallon prevented spoilage and gave his wine what contemporary reviews called an otherworldly bouquet with hints of cosmic significance. "Did it work?" asked Dr. Vasquez, who appeared to be taking notes on interdimensional wine preservation techniques. "The wine?" "Beautifully. The universal dissolution? Well, we're still here, so presumably not." Holloway consulted his notes. "Lorenzo's vintage became so popular that he had to increase production. By 1495, he was adding the formula to nearly every batch produced in the region." "What happened to the universe?" High Arbitrator Vexthul inquired with the tone of someone who suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Nothing particularly noteworthy," Holloway replied, though historians note that the Italian Renaissance reached unprecedented heights of artistic and scientific achievement during that period. Possibly unrelated. The hologram shifted again, this time showing a modern laboratory where a woman in a white coat was adjusting what appeared to be an array of crystalline structures that hummed with barely contained malevolence. "Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Quantum Acoustics Engineer, 2023, Holloway narrated. She encountered what the harmony of screaming silence called their consciousness-destroying frequencies, sound waves designed to unravel the listener's sense of self and replace it with an appreciation for avant-garde music. "That's oddly specific," Gornith observed. "The harmony has very particular artistic sensibilities," Holloway explained. Dr. Walsh was tasked with studying the frequencies as part of a first contact protocol. Instead, she accidentally discovered that played backward at half speed, they induced a meditative state that dramatically reduced anxiety and improved cognitive function. The hologram showed Dr. Walsh putting on headphones connected to the device. Instead of dissolving into cosmic appreciation for incomprehensible music, she appeared to relax visibly. The frequencies that were supposed to destroy consciousness became the basis for a meditation app that's currently helping millions of humans manage stress, Holloway continued. The Harmony of Screaming Silence has since filed 17 copyright infringement lawsuits. This is beginning to form a disturbing pattern, Morthegli admitted, her various dimensional aspects conferring with each other in languages that predated language itself. It gets better, Holloway promised, advancing to a final scene showing what appeared to be a teenager in a bedroom, plastered with posters of bands whose names violated several laws of physics. Tommy Brennan, age 16, 2024. He encountered what the collective of infinite longing described as their void that devours connection, designed to isolate sentient beings from all social contact and replace human relationships with an endless craving for impossible intimacy. Sounds like social media, Dr. Vasquez muttered. Tommy thought so too, Holloway agreed. He reverse-engineered the void's underlying principles and created a dating app that uses controlled existential longing to help people form genuine emotional connections. It has a 93% success rate for long-term relationships. He turned a weapon of isolation into a tool for bringing people together, Zephys asked, sounding like a bond market discovering that risk could sometimes lead to reward. Completely by accident, Holloway confirmed. He was just trying to understand why the void made him feel lonely in such a specific way. Turns out that when you analyze cosmic-scale loneliness mathematically, it becomes quite easy to identify and bridge the gaps between people who are lonely for compatible reasons. The hologram faded, leaving the tribunal to contemplate what they'd witnessed. The pattern should be obvious, Holloway said, returning his equipment to his impossible briefcase. Every species represented here has created weapons designed to exploit fundamental aspects of existence: reality, consciousness, happiness, connection. These weapons work exactly as designed when tested under controlled conditions. Then why don't they work on humans? Kethavar asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to suspect the answer wouldn't improve his day. Because humans don't interact with fundamental aspects of existence the way you expect rational beings to, Holloway replied. We don't approach ultimate weapons with proper reverence or existential dread. We approach them with curiosity and a regrettable tendency to wonder what happens if we try something different. Dr. Vasquez nodded enthusiastically. It's not that we're immune to these effects. It's that we're constitutionally incapable of leaving well enough alone. If you show us a device that's supposed to unmake reality, our first question isn't, how do we contain this threat? It's, what happens if I reverse the polarity? Which is exactly what makes you dangerous, Gornith pointed out. Or exactly what makes us useful, Holloway countered. Because if your ultimate weapon can't survive human curiosity, then it was never going to survive contact with a universe full of species who might eventually develop similar curiosity. High Arbitrator Vexthul arranged his temporal features into what might have been thoughtfulness, if thoughtfulness could exist across multiple time streams simultaneously. You suggest that humanity serves as a stress test for cosmic stability? Inadvertently, Holloway admitted. We don't set out to break ultimate weapons. We just can't seem to help ourselves. And if they break, well... He shrugged. Better to find out now than later. When the stakes are higher, Dr. Vasquez added helpfully. The stakes, Kethavar said slowly, are already universal annihilation. Are they, though? Holloway asked. Because if 6,000 years of humans accidentally encountering ultimate weapons hasn't ended the universe yet, perhaps these weapons aren't quite as ultimate as their creators believed. High Arbitrator Vexthul rose from his seat that existed in several centuries simultaneously, his temporal features arranging themselves into something resembling judicial gravitas, mixed with cosmic exhaustion. The tribunal had been deliberating for what felt like eons, but had probably been closer to 47 minutes in standard time. After extensive consideration of the evidence presented, he began, his voice echoing across dimensions that had no business being in the same courtroom. This tribunal has reached a conclusion that will surprise absolutely no one who has been paying attention. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her legal pad, where she had been sketching improvements to the courtroom's dimensional architecture. "Oh, good. I was getting bored." "The defendant," Vexthul continued, ignoring what should have been contempt of court, but was rapidly becoming contempt of cosmic order, stands accused of creating a weapon capable of unraveling the fundamental structure of reality itself. "Allegedly," Holloway interjected from his position at the defense table, where he appeared to be organizing his briefcase by filing complaints from various cosmic entities about humans breaking their stuff. "The evidence clearly demonstrates," Vexthul pressed on, "that such a weapon does indeed function as designed, possessing the theoretical capability to end existence as we understand it. In very small, controlled doses," Dr. Vasquez added helpfully. "However," and here Vexthul paused in a way that suggested the universe itself was holding its breath, "the tribunal has also been presented with overwhelming evidence that humanity's relationship with ultimate weapons follows a pattern that renders traditional concepts of cosmic threat assessment problematic. Kethavar's crystalline surfaces dimmed with what appeared to be resignation, mixed with the particular brand of defeat that comes from having one's fundamental worldview gently dismantled by a species that uses universe-ending artifacts as kitchen utensils. Therefore," Vexthul announced, "this tribunal finds the defendant guilty of creating a weapon of mass universal destruction." The courtroom's various dimensions held their collective breath. "However," he continued, "we also find that the traditional penalty for such crimes, containment, exile, or cessation of existence, would be counterproductive to universal stability." "I'm sorry, what?" Prosecutor Kethavar managed, his voice creating harmonic resonances that suggested several small realities were having nervous breakdowns. "Instead," Vexthul declared, with the sort of finality usually reserved for the heat death of stars, "by the authority vested in this tribunal by the cosmic concordat of mutually assured existence, we hereby designate humanity as the official quality assurance department for all weapons classified as universe-threatening or higher." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as a meditation aid. "You're promoting us?" Dr. Vasquez asked, sounding genuinely surprised for the first time during the proceedings. "We're institutionalizing you," Vexthul corrected. "If ultimate weapons cannot survive human curiosity, then they are not sufficiently ultimate to pose a genuine threat. Conversely, any weapon that can withstand human investigation may be considered genuinely dangerous and appropriately regulated." "That's," Holloway began, then stopped, apparently struck by the elegant simplicity of cosmic bureaucracy adapting to accommodate human chaos. "Brilliant," suggested Dr. Vasquez. "Terrifying," corrected Representative Morthglee, though several of her dimensional aspects appeared to be nodding in approval. "Both," concluded Gornith. "Definitely both." Dr. Vasquez stood, picking up her entropy blade with the casual confidence of someone who had just been officially authorized to poke the universe's most dangerous toys. "Well, this is unexpected. Usually when I build something this destructive, people just ask me to stop." "We considered that option," Vexthul admitted, "but the evidence suggests you wouldn't." "Probably not," she agreed cheerfully. Then, without warning or apparent malice, she grasped the entropy blade by both ends and snapped it cleanly in half. The weapon that had just unmade a pocket universe broke, with a sound like reality clearing its throat. "There we go," she said, examining the pieces with professional interest. "I was wondering when that would happen." The quantum matrix was unstable from the beginning. Too much focus on the entropy induction, not enough attention to structural integrity. "You just..." Kethavar stared at the broken weapon, his crystalline surfaces reflecting light that had given up trying to behave according to normal physics. "You just broke the thing that could supposedly end existence." "Well, obviously it couldn't actually end existence if it breaks that easily," Dr. Vasquez replied, reasonably. Though the pieces are still quite dangerous. This bit here could probably destabilize a small moon, and this end might erase the concept of Tuesdays from local spacetime. She held up the broken halves, examining them with the sort of professional interest usually reserved for mildly disappointing experimental results. Fascinating, she continued, as the pieces began to glow with residual entropy. The fracture pattern suggests the blade's destruction was always inevitable. It's almost like the universe has a built-in safety mechanism against truly ultimate weapons. Or, Holloway suggested, closing his briefcase with a satisfied snap, humans are the built-in safety mechanism. Before anyone could respond to this unsettling possibility, the broken weapon pieces began to reshape themselves, flowing like liquid metal guided by physics that had clearly given up on consistency. Within moments, Dr. Vasquez was holding what appeared to be a child's toy, a small, colorful cube that pulsed gently with residual cosmic energy. "Oh, that's interesting," she said, turning the cube over in her hands. "It's retained some quantum entanglement properties, but the dangerous bits have been converted into—" She pressed one of the cube's faces, and it emitted a soft, musical tone. "A puzzle game." Without thinking, she handed the reformed toy to a young member of the court staff, a being whose species existed primarily as concentrated administrative anxiety, but who had brought their offspring to work because their usual childcare provider was having an existential crisis. The child accepted the cube with the universal delight of young beings everywhere when presented with something that makes interesting sounds. Within moments, they had figured out how to make it cycle through a sequence of pleasant tones and gentle light patterns. "What have you done?" whispered Representative Zephys, though their tone suggested this was becoming a rhetorical question. "Quality assurance," Dr. Vasquez replied with a grin. "We took a weapon that could theoretically end existence, tested it until it broke, and turned the remains into something harmless and educational. The universe is now slightly safer, and one small being has a new toy that will probably help them develop spatial reasoning skills." High Arbitrator Vexthal observed the proceedings with the expression of someone who had just realized that the universe had a sense of humor, and it was significantly more twisted than he had previously suspected. "Court is adjourned," he announced, his temporal features rearranging themselves into something resembling bemused acceptance. "The defendant is released into the custody of the Department of Universal Quality Assurance, which as of this moment consists entirely of herself." As the various representatives began filing out of the courtroom, each grappling with the implications of a universe where the greatest threats were also the most effective solutions. Dr. Vasquez turned to her attorney. "So," she said casually, "what do you think they'll send us to test first?" Holloway considered this question with the sort of careful deliberation usually reserved for tax law or cosmic horror. "Knowing bureaucracy," he replied, "probably something that's been sitting in a vault somewhere for millennia because it's too dangerous to use and too valuable to destroy." "Perfect," Dr. Vasquez said, already pulling out her phone to start making notes. "I've been looking for a new project." Behind them, the young being continued playing with their new toy, blissfully unaware that they were holding the reformed remains of a weapon that had once threatened the conceptual framework of existence itself. The cube played a gentle melody and cast soft rainbow patterns on the walls as the courtroom slowly emptied. The universe, it seemed, had found its quality control department. Whether this made reality safer or simply ensured that any remaining threats would be genuinely worth worrying about remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Somewhere in the cosmos, another species was probably putting the finishing touches on their own ultimate weapon, confident in its terrible power and blissfully unaware that a cheerful human engineer with a tendency to reverse polarities was about to receive its location in her official government email.